Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm just going to experiment with something. I think that didn't work. I'm just going to see if the sound is working. Could people on Zoom indicate if they can hear? Can you hear me? It's a miracle. Excellent. Right, where were we? Good morning and welcome to you, all of you here in the church, as well as those of you on Zoom. I'm delighted we've been able to make contact when we couldn't earlier on, so that's just in the nick of time. So thank you and welcome. We gather, as we do each Sunday, partly to remember who we truly are and partly to build community together, and also to open our hearts and our minds to the divine as we understand it, to that ultimate mystery of love and life and of God. So welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see you here. It's a beautiful morning, and I'm very happy that you've been able to join us in whatever way you're here. And it's February already, and I have to say I'm quite glad about that. I realised I don't really like January very much, it turns out. I'm really enjoying the lengthening days and the ground just beginning to stir, almost imperceptibly, but still the first tentative shoots of life appearing. You probably know that this week, from sunset on the 1st of February to sunset on the 2nd of February was a Celtic pagan festival called Imolc, if you haven't heard of that. It's the festival of fire and hearth and home, which marks the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So it is something of a turning point, I think. In Brighton, they call this Sunday Seedy Sunday. They have a big festival and they swap seeds. So it's that beginning of that season of getting your seeds and starting to chit your potatoes. Joan usually reminds me at this point, Joan Frost over there. It's also, of course, this week it's been Candlemas in the Christian tradition and St. Breed's Day as well. So it's quite a moment in our spiritual lives in different ways. So we'll begin our service, as we always do, by lighting our chalice as a symbol of our free religious faith. People on Zoom or online might like to light one with me, but I'm not going to offer that to you. So let us light this flame today as a symbol of new life flickering into being and renewed hope springing eternal. And I invite you to join me in a time of prayer. And this first prayer is really, it's a prayer that reminds us how to pray, if you like. And it has a refrain running through it, which is help us to pray. Not everyone finds it necessarily easy to pray, or what does it mean to pray? So this is a prayer that might be helpful. So prayer is an opportunity to honestly reflect on our lives. Help us to pray. To contemplate our deepest values and concerns. Help us to pray. To be still and listen to the person we truly are and the divine spirit within us. Help us to pray. to access the well of renewal, healing, and forgiveness, which is always available to us. Help us to pray. To gain the courage to step beyond our comfort zones and to live more fearlessly. Help us to pray. To give thanks for the wondrous gifts we have been given. Help us to pray. To share our hopes and concerns with other seekers of truth. Help us to pray. To be silent, to empty our minds and allow ourselves to be filled with love and joy. Help us to pray. To let the divine Spirit flow through us. Help us to pray. And I'll just share with you a prayer from the Anglican tradition, a short prayer for Candlemas. O God, give us the eyes of faith to see your presence in the world. Where fear closes our eyes, help us. Where tears blind us, heal us. Where busyness keeps us from noticing, slow us. Where pride gets in the way, release us. Set us free to see your love at work in the world. Amen. So I called this service The Earth Awakes, which I think it does at this time, but it's also an opportunity for us to awake too. And our first hymn this morning is about waking up. Wake now, my senses. Now, before we sing it, I had a choice today. I could either play a recording with the choir, but a less familiar tune, or a recording of just the tune, which I think you will know better, but with no choir. And I decided to go for the no voices, but the tune that's more familiar. So I hope you will feel that that was an appropriate choice. So we're going to sing hymn number 181 in the purple hymn books. Words will be on the screen. And it's called Wake Now, My Senses. And there's an introduction, so don't start singing too soon. Well, I'm sure I managed to confuse you all there because, in fact, there was an accompaniment. So yes. What is this echo I hear? Sorry about that. Well sung, anyway. So we have a story, as always. And the story today, I realised I shared this with you in 2017, which remarkably is 6 years ago. So you may or may not remember it. It's some of you anyway. We have had other frog and toad stories in between, though. This is a frog and toad story. His name is Arnold Lobel, an American writer who wrote a lovely set of stories about two characters. They're a frog and a toad who are friends, and they're sort of moral stories as well. So this is called The Garden. Frog was in his garden, and Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it's very nice, but it was hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Well, here are some flower seeds," said Frog. "Plant them in the ground, and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home and he planted his flower seeds, and he said to them, "Now, seeds, start growing." He walked up and down a few times, and the seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." The seeds did not start to grow. So he put his head even closer to the ground and shouted, "Now, seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked. "My seeds won't grow," said Toad. "You're shouting too much," said Frog. "These poor seeds, they're afraid to grow." "My seeds are afraid to grow?" asked Toad. "Of course," said Frog. "Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow." That night, Toad looked out of his window. "Drat," he said. "My seeds have not started to grow. Maybe they're afraid of the dark." Toad went out into his garden with some candles. "I'll read the seeds a story," he said. "Then they won't be afraid." So Toad read a long story to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad sang to his seeds. And the next day, he read poems to his seeds. And the next day, he played music for his seeds. And Toad looked at the ground, and still the seeds did not start to grow. "What shall I do?" cried Toad. "These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world." And then he felt very tired and he fell asleep. Frog came along. Toad, wake up. Look at your garden." Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. "At last," shouted Toad. "My seeds have stopped being afraid to grow." "And now you'll have a nice garden," said Frog. "Yes," said Toad, "but you're right, it was very hard work." We'll come back to that story later. In the meantime, let's sing our second hymn, which does have a choir accompaniment and words. And I think you may have sung it last week, so I expect you to sing it even better this week. It's number 147, Spirit of Earth, Root, Stone and Tree. 147.
Oh
Beautiful. Now we're going to see if we can hear from Joan Wilkinson, who is going to share a reading with us, I hope. I'm going to spotlight her, and when I've done that, Steve, if you can press the Zoom button. And let's see if it works.
Right, a poem by Rumi. Those who don't feel this love, pulling them like a river. Those who don't drink dawn like a cup of spring water, or take sunset like supper. Those who don't want to change, let them sleep. This love is beyond the study of theology, that old trickery and hypocrisy. If you want to improve your mind that way, sleep more. I've given up on my brain. I've torn the cloth to shreds and thrown it away. If you're not completely naked, wrap your beautiful robe of words around you and sleep.
Okay, thank you very much, Joan. And I'm also going to be referring to that reading later, so if you didn't hear it all that clearly, you will hear it better in a moment. We're going to come to a time of reflection. And first of all, I'm just going to read a little bit of that poem, the beginning of it anyway. Rumi says, "Those who don't feel this love pulling them like a river, those who don't drink dawn like a cup of spring water, or take sunset like supper, those who don't want to change, let them sleep. This love is beyond the study of theology, that old trickery and hypocrisy. If you want to improve your mind that way, sleep on." So Rumi is a Sufi saint, an ancient times, and a prolific poet. So he certainly loved words, but he was also much more interested in direct relationship with the divine rather than reading about theology or arguing about theology, although of course that has its place. He certainly loved his words with his poetry, but he was in this poem talking about how you connect immediately with the divine by drinking in the sunrise or feeling the pull of love like a river through you. So what he's saying really is that you can't find God by talking about God. You can find only by surrendering yourself to what is. And we can also do that by surrendering ourselves to silence. So we're going to take a little bit of time in silence now, just a couple of minutes, for your own prayers and thoughts or meditation. And then we'll hear some music, which is Teze music associated with this time of year with Candlemas, called Nunc Dimittis. And the image that you'll see with that shows Simeon and Anna in the temple, because Candlemas is a celebration from the biblical perspective of the baby Jesus being presented at the temple for the very first time, 40 days after birth. And Simeon and Anna recognized him as Messiah. And there was something about them being alert and noticing and ready for change that allowed them to do that. So let's enter the silence and then enjoy the music. It seems to me that the earth is a great teacher. It knows how to pace itself. It understands that there's time when we need to withdraw, to rest, a time to lay low and to mull, and to regroup and prepare. And it knows there is time to stir and emerge, as now. Nothing too obvious yet. Just the first signs of some movement and some life. A few tentative forays out of the darkness to signify that things are just beginning to awaken. Snowdrops flowering here and there. I notice the camellias are budding. And while still very much remains hidden for now, buried in the earth, still gestating, hidden from our view, but still things will be happening under there. And I wonder if we may feel similarly ourselves, as though we are also beginning to come out of our shells, out of the darkest weeks of the year. That maybe we have in some ways been hibernating, going inwards, perhaps, staying in, perhaps, finding the cold and the dark difficult at times. Perhaps there has been a sense of not much happening. Maybe you have felt a bit stuck or just hunkering down and waiting. And yet too, of course, even if that's how you've been feeling, just like in the ground, it's not that there's nothing happening. Still, we are mulling. Still, we are reforming in our own ways. Much of the work being done in our unconscious minds, perhaps, but going on all the same. And maybe, as the time is right, something new may begin to emerge, or something old but subtly altered, a different angle on an old problem, perhaps, a slightly different perspective on what's possible, maybe. Perhaps the sense of a window or a door opening and a little more light coming in. Which reminds me that yesterday I saw that there's an old Roman road being uncovered. Those of you who live near Plymouth, you'll know that there's Sherford developments going on out sort of Climpton Way and beyond. It's got a big development, almost like a new town, really. But they keep uncovering things as they go along. And the recent revelation is an ancient Roman path road and some of the artifacts from that time, which is amazing that something could come to light after all that time being buried. So that also seemed as though it fitted in with the feeling of this time, this season, of things being revealed that have been hidden. Now, to go back to our frog and toad story, I very much like to think I'm more like Frog. However, I find I do empathise with Toad. There are certainly times when I feel impatient and expect immediate results and get frustrated when they don't happen. And I want any seeds that I plant, whether they're real or metaphorical, to just come up now. Now, Kay Millard, who's with us on Zoom, shared a little anecdote with me this week about her grandfather, and it made me smile, so I'll just share it with you. Apparently, he used to say, there are better ways of catching a rabbit than by running after it shouting. And I think that's very true in life, isn't it? That there are better ways of things happening than us trying to sort of make a lot of noise and force them, as Toad was trying to do. So I don't know about you, but I certainly have times when I feel stuck and impatient. And sometimes there are quite long fallow periods, maybe, when it's easy to feel you're stagnating or and you don't really know how to change anything. Do you ever have that feeling? But then eventually there is a chink of light. And even just a chink of light can be enough to start a tiny flame. And then it can turn out that all that wondering and waiting and stuck in the mudness can turn out to have actually been essential preparation, though we didn't realize it at the time. Things were happening. And then when the time was right, they start to emerge. And I've had this experience myself recently because I've been trying to plan a sabbatical, which I'm going to take. And I think the problem for me was there just too many possibilities, but nothing really very clear. And too many possibilities is not helpful for me because I just start to get confused. And I had a while ago put out to a couple of friends who I thought might know that I might be interested in going to Orkney, and did they know anywhere, and I'd done a bit of research and so on. But nothing seemed to really come up. So I kind of gave up on that idea. And then suddenly, out of the blue, a friend of a friend contacted me and said, are you thinking of going to Orkney? I wondered if you'd thought of this. And they recommended going to this really tiny little island right in the north. It's called Papa Westray. And I looked it up and it just really appealed to me, and it has a lovely hostel, and I rang them up and they said, yeah, of course, you can come and stay for a week here. That's no problem. And they have a fair trade community shop, so you don't need to bring any food with you, and you can get boats to other islands, and there's a little museum, and there's Neolithic remains and lots of birds to watch. And suddenly it was like, oh, okay, here it is. This thing that I thought wasn't going to happen suddenly starts to emerge. I'm not saying it's all been plain sailing since then. There's lots of logistics to work out, and some of those not yet sorted. But the sense of a plan revealing itself, I think, is a kind of helpful for me to remember that not everything just happens like that. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And time and patience is a great help. So it feels as though, a bit like the Roman road, as though this plan has been revealed more than I've made it happen. And I was thinking also, because we're talking about seeds, I was thinking of the parable of the sower in the New Testament. And if you're familiar with that parable, you might remember that when the seeds are cast, some of them fall onto stony ground or rocky ground or barren ground, but some of them fall onto fertile ground. And I was thinking that for us, part of our role in spiritual life is to try to prepare a sort of fertile ground in which things can happen. So that's around us, but also within us. So our spiritual practices help with that. Our prayer and our meditation help to prepare ourselves as fertile ground for our hopes and our inspiration, and for the divine spirit to move through us. But also we can enable or help prepare fertile ground in other areas of our life. And that fertile ground doesn't necessarily come up with shoots straight away, but we plant the seeds and we see what happens. And also to go back to that Rumi idea of letting love, and he uses a capital L for love, so this is God-type love. Let it pull you like a river. So to tune into the force of that and the energy of that. So I think for me, this time of year is a time of beginnings of an awakening for the earth, but also can be a time of awakening for us, or whenever the time is right for you. So it's an opportunity to be alert and watchful for all the delights of what emerges at this time in nature, but also to notice and to nurture any stirrings in our own souls about what might be the way forward for us at this time, what new adventures or ways or what callings we might feel at this time. So let us sing once more. This is our third and final hymn for today, and it's number 42 in the Purple Hymn Books again, and it's From the Light of Days Remembered. So it's number 42. So I'm going to share some words to close by the Irish priest John O'Donoghue. It's about beginning, new beginnings. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the grey promises that sameness whispered. Heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, Wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground. Your eyes young again, with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. May it be so.